First things first, guys. How are you?
Good.
Okay. Well, before we talk about the new record, I'd like to go back just a little bit to 2011.
Okay.
When did the decision come to take a break, so to say? Was it while touring or?
Oh, I mean, I can't think of a tour that's ever ended.
Okay.
Where we weren't just like, at least me, I felt like at the end of every tour I've ever done, I've been like, that's it, done.
Or at least like,
at
least like hoping for a break for.
Yeah.
What is it about touring then that gets you to this stage?
It's really hard. Touring's really, really hard. I mean, it's like, for people who haven't toured like that, it's most people can identify with what working really hard is like. Well, just throw traveling into the mix, and it's very exhausting, and it can be very disruptive of your life. You know, if you have a settled life somewhere, it's very disruptive, and it's emotionally exhaustive. And our last tour was really difficult. I think we've had lots of hard tours, but our last tour was our hardest tour.
In what way? For the reasons you just mentioned?
Just for a number of reasons, but it was a very difficult period. And so when we were done, we really needed to take some time.
In that sense, because you say it disrupts kind of your life in a way, does it impede on your creativity as well?
Touring?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. In the way that, like, I mean, we could just be in the studio the whole time if we wanted to.
The one thing that touring does that's is nice is that it makes you want to be in the studio, because simply by the fact that you can't be.
That's true.
Really it can be motivating to make you want to be in the studio, because when you're at home and you have access to the studio all the time, you have the choice to not go. But once that choice is removed, then the grass is always greener.
Yeah, and you have these weird things. I always do these weird things when you're touring and you're doing sound check, and you do one good idea in a sound check and you wish you had recorded that. It's some sort of weird thing like that.
Also, the fact that you're performing the same set of material all the time, as opposed to working on new ideas, which is what you're doing in the studio. So you're always doing the same songs. So and you can't say like, oh, let's just try this out. Or you can, there's a little bit, but I mean. Yeah.
So in that sense, do a lot of ideas start on the road and then you kind of or nothing?
No.
Okay.
No, we're into the studio. I mean, that's where everything.
Well, sometimes you have like a chord change thing or something like that you like. I like the sound that you try to remember it.
Not on this record.
Okay. So was there then because you obviously kept busy in the past 5 years, was there a point where everything started again, where you thought, okay, now is the time we should think about the next album again? For me, we didn't do anything while I was working on it with Jessy, not to my knowledge.
Yeah, there was almost a full, almost 9 months to a year of not doing anything. But there wasn't a full year where we didn't do anything.
There was a lot of material that happened on this new record that didn't make it to the new record.
Okay.
So Matt came over and did a bunch of work that just we never finished because we didn't like it enough or whatever happened. So there's actually a lot of material that didn't get used. So we were working pretty steadily. At one point I felt like there was a whole album's worth of stuff nearly finished, and then
I don't think any of that stuff is on the
and I don't think any of that stuff is on the album. There was like this sort of half-finished other album almost.
Why didn't that particular set of ideas didn't make it?
Wasn't good enough, I don't think.
It's difficult when you work on things for a while. Sometimes you become sick of things. Sometimes it just it seems natural. There should be a certain group of things together. You can also just forget about some things, or when you get focused on another song. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're not.
I think the other thing was like at the beginning, this first stuff that we were doing on this record, I think sounded a little bit too much like the previous stuff we had done. And then at a certain point, stuff started sounding much newer and fresher. And then we just sort of felt like, well, let's make it all sound new and not like the old stuff.
Was there a particular turning point or a song that kind of helped you go in this direction?
On this, no. A lot of not a particular. But for me personally, doing stuff with Jessy is really what motivated and changed a lot of things for me in lots of different ways, and gave me a much fresher approach to doing the new Junior Boy stuff.
Can you give me one example of something that you took away from working with her?
Okay, well, I mean, like a specific example in terms of like musically or whatever. Well, in one sense, before working with Jessy and doing the solo releases, and Matt's done his solo releases,
right.
So well, I can't speak for Matt, but for me anyway, before doing that stuff, I felt as though Junior Boys was my whole musical, like,
Palette.
it was like the only thing I did
Sure.
really musically, or the only thing that I was at least known for or whatever. And so when I started working with Jessy, I didn't have any expectations particularly about how well it would do. And the album did so much better commercially, critically, or whatever than I ever anticipated, that even though it's out under Jessy's name and she did so much, like we did it together or whatever, it gave me a sense of freedom, the sense that I didn't have to do Junior Boys if I didn't want to. I have this other thing I can do, it's paying some bills and all that kind of shit. And so when I was able to start doing Junior Boys again, there was no pressure associated with it for me. I didn't feel like, man, I gotta finish this album to make some money, or I gotta finish this album or else no one is gonna care about what I do, or I gotta finish this album because this is what I do for a living. None of that. So because of that, it meant that I could make the album do whatever the hell I want it to be.
Yeah, did it change the way you approach the music then, creatively?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it made me feel like I could be much more experimental with it, because ultimately I didn't really care as much about how it did.
Sure, and also the fact that it was being out of a record contract as well.
Yeah, we were out of a record contract. We had all sorts of time. There was no time constraints. Like, we did this whole other kind of album. We were like, there's no one saying to us, hey, you got to deliver an album.
They're obligated to make it.
Yeah, because we had finished our contractual obligations to our other record label at the time.
And then when you both went on your separate endeavors, when did you call Matt, for instance, to say, okay, maybe we should do an album, maybe we should think about doing an album, or how did it?
We never completely stopped doing it. Like, it was because in a way, like, I came back, I think, to Canada at least twice every year since to work on stuff for a period of at least usually a month at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as Jerry said, there's a whole other boatload of
I can't remember
of unfinished or like material. So it was kind of like, I don't think it was like there was definitely, like, I think as this one came along further, there was a sense of like urgency to finish the record after a while, but I think there was a few years of just kind of like seeing what came out, with the.
Yeah.